This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Today, Wisconsin's gubernatorial election is more than a year away, but there are already multiple candidates in the running, including 3 Madison area hopefuls. So let's talk about it. But first, here on CityCast Madison, it's the last week of our fall membership campaign, and we're asking for your support. We believe that for Madison to thrive, we need to connect across our differences, and you should know you can count on us to help make that possible. Every day, we share stories that help you better understand your city and your neighbors, celebrate what we all have in common, and wrestle honestly with where we disagree. In the conversation you're about to hear, I talk with WTMJ's Point Taken hosts, Kristen Bry and Steve Scafidi, about the governor's race and its stakes across the political aisle. When you become a CityCast Madison neighbor, you're helping sustain this essential local conversation. Neighbors make this episode and conversations like it possible. Quite literally. We put out this podcast and our newsletter free because we believe everyone should have access to quality local news. But this work doesn't happen by accident. And we need more listeners to step up and become a neighbor today to help sustain this work. We need at least 30 of you out there listening to sign up and help us reach our goals. Are you out there? It's just $10 a month or $100 a year at membership.citycast.fm. That's at membership.citycast.fm. Help sustain the show, become a neighbor, and keep these critical conversations happening for years to come. One more time, you can sign up to be a neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. Alrighty, as a note, we recorded this conversation on the gubernatorial race last week, and unsurprisingly, already changes have dropped. Republican Bill Berrien has left the race, and Democrat Missy Hughes has entered. With no further ado, let's get into it. Joining me today to give their takes and set the stakes of this race is the dynamic duo of Milwaukee, leading state political commentators and stars in their own rights, hosts of WTMJ's Point Taken, Kristen Bry and Steve Scafidi. How are y'all doing?
I'm good.
We're good.
Yeah.
We're good. Yeah.
We just got off the air, so we're pumped.
This is definitely a celebratory day because I'm really excited to talk with y'all. Kristen, it's great to have you back on CityCast Madison. Steve, great to have you on for the first time. So we're kind of in a first in a while. This is the first open gubernatorial election in Wisconsin in a decade. So Kristen, can you help set the scene for us? Like, what's really at stake here in this election for our next governor?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, what's interesting is the fact that it's the first time since 2010 that there is a chance, like Democrats have a chance, right? As far as getting the assembly back, maybe. I think it's 5 seats in the assembly they would have to pick up, 2 seats in the state senate that it would have to pick up. So not insurmountable as it had been for the last 15 or so years. And then as we always know with, statewide races, it's a 50-50, right? We are a purple state. These are very, very close races. And as of right now, what's interesting is, as you said, there is no incumbent for the first time since 2010. And the fact that no one as of right now has like statewide name recognition, I would argue. Like if Josh Kaul does get in, he's run statewide. If Mandela Barnes gets in, he's run statewide. But otherwise, the Democratic field as of right now, I guess technically Kelda Royce ran statewide in a primary.
Right.
And then similarly, Tom Tiffany, obviously congressman for a large part of the state, not the most populous part of the state, but has been 2 terms there, but also has been in the state legislature for a decade before that. And then Josh Schoeman, Bill Berrien, like none of these people actually like come in with a ton of star power of people who already know them, know their politics. So in a lot of ways, it's an even playing field in that way. And it's going to come down to like messaging and fundraising, and come January, like how much money have people been able to raise, and understand how that also indicates, even if your favorite candidate is there, if they're not fundraising well, how that changes the race. So I think it's more, the stakes are always high because it's Wisconsin, but I think it's also just really interesting of how this is going to be a bellwether of how Wisconsinites are feeling, especially in Trump 2.0 America.
Here's what I love about this race. You mentioned at the open, Bianca, it is a litmus test without a incumbent candidate on the state of Wisconsin. What do we always say? Purple state, 50-50, anybody can win. Trump, wins and loses. Tony Evers decided not to run. So now all of these candidates on both sides, more on the Democratic side at this moment than on the other side of the aisle, have an opportunity to present themselves. So this is a litmus test for Wisconsin. What are we? What kind of state are we? And when you look at the candidates, there are broad differences, obviously, between the two political sides, but even among the candidates themselves. On the Republican side, we have Bill Berrien, a business owner who's gotten himself in some trouble. He did not have the best start of his campaign. Josh Schoeman, Washington County executive, obviously somebody who was on my show previously to a point taken, being on the air. I've known for a long time, an executive who's done the job. And then Tom Tiffany, very popular congressman from northern Wisconsin on the Republican side, who has now interjected himself into at least the Republican side for the nomination. I still don't know on both sides who the favorites are.
Yeah.
I still don't. We haven't had really great polling because the field's not complete yet, and we don't know what the numbers are going to say. So that's, for me, this litmus test is the big piece of this race that I'm interested in.
Oh, this is so exciting having you on the show. And I know I did throw you right in the deep end. Like, what are the stakes? You answered that masterfully. And it is really interesting that people are getting their moment. People have been waiting to jump in, and now we really are seeing folks. And we're talking about this early, but several Madison names are in the running. So we appreciate you, getting in on this. But yeah, we know the name of the game in Wisconsin politics has really been gridlock. We've got a state Supreme Court that's holding a solid liberal majority, the state legislature holding a solid Republican majority. So it is sort of this question about what will the governor, what kind of power will they have? That's yet to be seen depending on how this goes. And we already got into a bit of the candidates, but I want to get into the candidates who've announced they're running. So I want to start with the Democrats. So far, they include Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, State Senator Kelda Roys, State Representative Francesca Hong, former Dane County Supervisor Brett Halsley, and American Family Field beer vendor Ryan Sternad. Kristen, it's a lot of names.
We had everyone but Brett, because he just announced. We've had everyone else has come on the show.
Okay, so I listened to a show of your guys', and you're like, we're probably not going to interview people until next year, but you jumped in,
and then we jumped in because
I
think the thing that's cool about
not the first time we changed our minds on
that's also true.
And you're allowed
you say things, and we're like, oh, whatever. Like now they're here. So we've gotten everyone but Brett because he just announced. We've not gotten Bill Berrien from the Republican side, and we're having Tom Tiffany.
Josh Schoeman will join our show next week.
And Josh Schoeman came on when he first joined. So we've been actually pretty good about getting people pretty quickly after they have announced.
A, I'm stoked to hear that. B, I'm sorry I'm not already up on all of them, that you guys have had them. Good on you. And also, that's why we're talking to you, which is really exciting. Kristen, I was going to ask you, what do you make of the folks who entered on the Democratic side so far, who've entered the race? Does anyone stand out? Have you been surprised by anything so far?
I was surprised Francesca Hong got in. I mean, I've known Fran for a long time, and her brand has been a firebrand, right? She is a pusher. She is a very safe district, so she can kind of push the envelope more than some of her colleagues who are in a more purple area. The thing that's authentic about Fran is she really doesn't care about the consequences, right? She's not picking and choosing her words. So we had conversations in the past of her wondering how does that fit into a leadership role? And so I think the conversations she's obviously had to make this push to shoot her shot because it is an open field, I think is really exciting. And out of everyone who's running, I think she changes the primary. I think the primary would have been polite and interesting, but now there's something as far as her unapologetic stance as a democratic socialist. I think her willingness to say things that a lot of politicians aren't always comfortable saying. And I think she's already announcing this statewide tour, and she's going to work her butt off. She's had a really strong game on social out of the gate. So I think her kind of almost like Mamdani energy, which may or may not translate to Wisconsin, I think really is going to make everyone up their game. It also is going to make the Democrats have to make a choice of what lane am I in? Because she clearly is taking the far left lane. And do you fight, for lack of a better word, do you compete for that far left lane with Francesca Hong? Do you find more moderate? What do you find your issues to be? Because obviously this is the first time in a while that we've had a Democratic primary of understanding with the primary voters, who are you appealing to in order to get through the general election, knowing that if you're too far to the left, You're going to have to figure out how to run on that once you're through August and on to November.
100%. I mean, I've also known Fran for a long time from working in the food industry, and I felt the exact same way. I'm like, I was kind of surprised, but then now that I think about it, she was touring other parts of the state a fair amount recently. But absolutely, you lay that up beautifully. She is almost kind of like the Wisconsin's version of Bernie Sanders. She is safe in Madison, but bringing it to the larger statewide race will be really interesting, and having someone who's pretty forthright. Steve, do you have any reactions to the Democratic lineup so far?
I mean, I've talked to Sarah Rodriguez. I've talked to Kelda Royce. I think I interviewed when you were off for a week. So I was impressed with the candidates. I'm missing the obvious one.
David Crowley.
David Crowley, a friend of mine for more than a decade. I'm right here in Milwaukee County. I've worked alongside. I was an elected official in Oak Creek, so we worked together on projects because many things in our community of Oak Creek are county owned. So we had to sort of figure that piece out. And I'm not a Democrat, but I said all along, I see David Crowley and Sarah Rodriguez as sort of the linchpins of the success of Democrats. I could be completely wrong. I'm not a Democrat, but I see them as having a power base. Obviously, Sarah from having a high position in state government, and David from leading the county in the largest county, most populous county in the state of Wisconsin. So I think that's the power play that I see. Obviously, Josh Kaul coming in is a whole nother factor.
If that happens.
He's been Attorney General. He's won a statewide race. But again, you just said it, if that happens. And I've got no indications from people I talk to that that's going to happen. But we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else on the Democratic side that you think might jump in?
Missy Hughes, as far as she's the secretary, was the secretary of the WEDC, which is obviously the business arm of Governor Evers' cabinet, and very little name recognition outside of the business community. And so it'll be interesting, but I think once she resigned from her position, I think it was a strong indicator that she's also going to get in, which again, finding that lane of being like a pro-business, economy-driven Democrat, and how does that play in a primary?
Are you ready to Vogue? Tickets are available now for St. Vinny's On the Runway, St. Vinny's thrift store's first ever fashion show. I can barely contain my excitement. The date is Wednesday, October 15th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the beautiful Madison Youth Arts Center. The show is a benefit to raise funds for St. Vinny's charitable programs like their food pantry, pharmacy, and housing support. This show is also celebrating 100 years of impact for Vinny's, as 2025 is St. Vinny's centennial. At On the Runway, there will be a pop-up shop, historical exhibit viewing, and a style show. Tickets are $25, but don't wait because there's only a limited supply. And you might know the MC, Krista Hatcher, afternoon host at Z104 Madison, and John Cobb, Associate Director of Retail Operations at the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, Madison. So what are you waiting for? Get your tickets today. Visit svdpmadison.org/event/Saint-Vinny's-on-the-runway.
Hey there, Haley Sperling here, executive producer of CityCast Madison. You know from listening to this show that we love Madison, but the only reason that this show works is because of you. You tune in because you're genuinely invested in the local conversation. If I had to guess, you're probably someone who shops local whenever possible. You might be the go-to friend for local gossip, and I wouldn't be surprised if you carry your library card around everywhere you go. If this sounds like you, I'd like to invite you to join CityCast Madison Neighbors. Our membership program is designed to help folks like you who care about our city engage more deeply with life here. You'll get invites to members-only events, our curated weekly roundup of the best things to do in the city, and now through October 3rd, you'll get an awesome tote bag that says Neighbors Make Madison, because it's true. You can become a CityCast Madison neighbor for just $10 a month or $100 a year at membership.citycast.fm. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm.
Let's let's talk about the Republican candidates and who might jump in there. We've already got that started, but again, I'm just going to lay them out. So the three serious candidates in the race we talked about, there are U.S. Rep. Tom Tiffany, businessman Bill Berrien, and Washington County Executive Josh Schoeman. Steve, can you talk about, from your point of view, like, what's your take on these folks? And are there any clear leaders there?
It's a great question, Bianca, and I think I've interviewed Josh Schoeman before he was a candidate. He was on my show every other week for a couple of years. So as a former elected, he's obviously the Washington County executive. I always wanted to hear what he had to say about local government, local politics, what they were doing. And then, of course, you have Tom Tiffany, who just got in recently last week, established congressman. He wins by 20% in his district in the state of northern Wisconsin. I think he lives in Hazelhurst, so that's Wisconsin, but basically Wausau North. Very popular. I've interviewed him a number of times. I was impressed with him. So he's somebody that can hold his own in a debate or a conversation about running for the state's highest office. I've never interviewed Bill Berrien. And my perceptions about Bill Berrien are based on his appearances and his interviews, and I've not been impressed. He stumbled through his first couple interviews on some of the other radio stations in town. He was not prepared. He's had some issues lately with some of his internet activity. I don't want to go into that because I haven't investigated it, but it's not positives for his campaign. I've heard there's been some turmoil in his campaign staff. All of those things are not positives for a candidate. But here's the question. Early polling, this is a while ago, suggested Tom Tiffany would be the leader. And I don't dispute that. Congressman is certainly a higher profile than a Washington County executive. But I think Josh Schoeman, and I'll put my bias out there, I support Josh Schoeman, so I'm already in that camp because I know him personally. I think he will be stronger than most people think. And if Bill Berrien doesn't survive this process for all the things I just talked about, a race between Tiffany and Schoeman is interesting to me because it's northern Wisconsin versus southern Wisconsin, which is, last time I checked, where most of the people live.
Right.
Well, I also just think it's interesting as far as the Trump of the matter, right? As far as
Perfect, yeah.
We definitely have to talk about the Trump of the matter.
In the same way we're talking about how does a Democrat get through the primary and then pivot, or what do they have to change for the general, the same thing happens for Republicans as far as the golden ticket is a Trump endorsement. And what do you have to do to get that Trump endorsement? And I don't know, I think on record, Tom Tiffany is more MAGA,
Yes.
right?
I can rate him for you. Tom Tiffany, Bill Berrien, and Josh Schoeman.
Yeah.
And the last two are neck and neck.
So in the launch video for Tom Tiffany, it hit on some of the trans issues and some of the hot button culture war issues where I don't feel like I've heard Josh is talking a game as far as being bipartisan, getting things done. And that's not to say that he's not a conservative, but if that's the lane he's going to fill, it creates a stark comparison, at least.
Josh Schoeman understands the Trump angle here. He's not stupid. He understands that you certainly have to court that, but he's also not going in blindly and saying whatever the president said. He doesn't do that. He's an astute observer of politics. I said on the show the other day, he's the most well-read candidate on our side, on the Republican side. He's a smart guy, does it, and has, as Kristen said, worked across the aisle. He was part of the effort to have Act 12 passed because local leaders like Josh and David Crowley on the other side said, we need help. And they were able to sort of walk that line and make that work for not just the people that agree with them, but the ones that don't. So that's something you think about as well.
Yeah, and just thinking about, like you said, Milwaukee and Madison were both in the areas that have the most populace and like big voter turnout in Milwaukee and Madison. And the only thing I wonder about growing up in rural Wisconsin, I grew up in Baraboo. People in Baraboo, some of them think that Madison is a different country. And I know Milwaukee gets painted a certain way across the state. So I do imagine that sort of the perspective of, these city folks versus the rest of us as real Wisconsinites, that might be a tension. But I'm glad that we're getting into the possible Trump effects here because we have seen him, help make or break elections. Though not quite enough influence to tip the scales in the Republican favor this past big Supreme Court election. So I am curious, do either of you expect Trump to weigh in and like put his backing behind someone? And, what might the after effects of that be?
I think he will. I don't know if it'll be soon. I would imagine it's going to be next year. If you think about for 2022, Tim Michels didn't get in until April. And then after he got in, kind of quickly, I don't know, within a month, he had Trump's endorsement. So they're talking May of next year. And so I don't think there's any rush for a Trump endorsement as far as how quickly we can expect to get it, but eventually. And I don't know if that's him being a kingmaker or he sees what the polls are and then he chooses by wanting to pick the winner. But certainly I think he'll weigh in.
The reality for Donald Trump is that this is a state, he says he won 3 times. Well, those of us who actually look at the numbers know he only won it twice. But he understands how important this state is, not just in the governor's race, but in midterms, in the next presidential election, which he will not be a candidate for because that Constitution is clear on that, my opinion. But they all the 3 candidates that are in right now, they understand the impact of a Trump endorsement. I don't see him doing it early, but other than Bill Berrien sort of playing the Nikki Haley game early in the race last time, that would be the only thing that would upset Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to pick the winner. And in this case, I think he'd be more than happy with Tom Tiffany or Josh Schoemann. Bill Berrien remains to be seen because he was a Nikki Haley supporter.
Yeah, and in terms of those other elections, do you have any thought that the spring state Supreme Court election might impact this race in terms of, sometimes people think about draining Kristen, I see you smiling, draining resources and...
Well, the conservatives need a candidate.
Yeah, right now we don't have one.
Really?
Good point.
Right? Like until there's a serious candidate that they're putting money and energy behind, Christine Taylor is going to have a 6-month lead on this person. And, they're, again, no incumbent. It's always high stakes because I don't think conservatives want to go down even an additional seat. But this race doesn't decide the fate of the court like the last 2 elections
That's
did.
the decider, right? So one, that it's not going to change anything. The outlay of cash to run a race that you're probably going to lose, and let's be honest, that's what's happened recently. I interviewed Chris Taylor a couple weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
For your podcast?
No, for the show. You were gone.
Where was I?
I know you were gone. She was really, really good. I was impressed with her. Now, we may not agree on a lot of things, but I was impressed by her ability to understand the role of a Wisconsin Supreme Court justice. So for me,
she's been in and out of all of the systems, like here in Madison, like thoroughly. Yeah.
She was a state senator before she became
incredible
a judge,
resume.
Right? Yeah.
And look, the writing's on the wall. It seems to me that a liberal candidate has a great chance of winning that seat next year.
So that's why I don't think it's going to be the same intensity of the last 2 races that we saw.
No, maybe less.
Yeah.
Maybe less money, maybe less crazy ads. I could be wrong, but it just doesn't seem like they have the right candidate and the right. That was a stated reason why Bradley said she's not running, right?
Yeah, we asked our Republican strategist friend Bill McCoshen this question, and he didn't have a good idea who the candidate would be. So there's no names out there. That shows you that there's a dearth of anybody that's even interested in that.
I'm talking with WTMJ's Point Taken hosts Kristen Bry and Steve Scafidi about the governor's race and the political stakes for Wisconsin. We're 3 people who've spent years learning and understanding our state's particular brand of politics and the key players. A lot of CityCast Madison's listeners, possibly you out there, are transplants to Madison and tell us often that CityCast has helped you understand your city more, has helped you feel more at home here. That's what we're all about, making Madison feel like it's a place you can thrive in, no matter when you got here, helping you navigate the social and political scene. That's our deal. If this show has helped you feel more connected to Madison, become a CityCast Madison neighbor today, right now. We need your help to keep this program around. It's just $10 a month or $100 a year at membership.citycast.fm. And if you do become a neighbor, you'll get benefits like ad-free podcast listening, members-only events newsletter, and get invites to neighbors-only hangs to become even more connected. Plus, there's a tote bag you will also get if you sign up during this campaign. Together, we can keep building the community we all want to belong to. Sign up to become a neighbor today. Help us smash our goals at membership.citycast.fm. We need your help, and we can't do this without you. Steve, you've run for office, you've run campaigns. I really wanted to ask you about the timelines here in terms of the party infrastructures. Kristen, you just mentioned, we're not going to really find out until spring of next year. And that's what I understand, at least from the Republican side. They don't even put money in until the conference. What are the timelines here and the key dates that candidates are strategizing around? I know it's not into September, but are there sort of key moments that folks are targeting?
For the governor's race, the reason why we're seeing people getting in now is so that they have a full quarter to be able to show how much they've raised this quarter, which is due in January. So then in January, knowing how much money they've raised and kind of that being a indicator of how well they're doing, how is their message being like resonating with the donor class, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's an important thing. And then it's not until April or May that they need to get their signatures.
If Republicans or Democrats want a candidate, they know what those lines and those benchmarks are. I'm pretty sure, maybe you'll disagree, that on the governor's side of things, other than Missy Hughes, is there any other names that you're thinking of?
And Josh Kaul.
And Josh Kaul. That'd be it.
Or Mandela.
Perhaps Mandela.
So there could be up to 3 more candidates whose names have been floated as potential. And then, I don't know, there may be more Brett Hulseys in the world that
maybe, but other than a former candidate like Tim Michaels or the mustache guy, Eric Hovde, who doesn't have a mustache now, by the way, which is sort of interesting. I would have
Shame. Sorry. I love mustaches.
Mustaches have been, I think,
they're having a comeback. They're having a moment. Yeah. So that's the thing. Like those 2 candidates could potentially get back in on the Republican side, which obviously a lot more money if they're willing to spend their own money again like that, and more name recognition since they've already run a statewide campaign.
But just to answer your question more directly, the time goes pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Year seems like it's not that long. If we're not getting those names now, they've got a few more months. They got to decide, and then you got to be all in, because as Kristen said, that last quarter is big, and then early next year, some of that one race is already getting their signatures. So it changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate us kind of laying that out, and it sounds like you're feeling the field is mostly full at this point. Like, we'll maybe get a few more names, but we've got a pretty good picture of who will be watching for the gubernatorial. I want to step back briefly just to talk about our governor, Tony Evers, a Democrat who's successfully run for 2 terms as governor, first defeating Scott Walker back in 2018 and then Tim Michaels in 2022. He's been known as a candidate who can work across the political aisle, appeal to broader populations of the state. He's got Wisconsin swag, shall we say. Steve, when it comes to campaigning and governing, what do you think worked well for Governor Evers? And do you think anyone in this race will be trying to model those tactics or model his success?
I think that as much as I'm not a Governor Evers supporter, I worked well with him over the years. I interviewed him dozens of times, including at the state fair every year. He always made time for us or for me in my previous show. What I would emulate is even in the toughest lack of partisan environment of Wisconsin, Governor Evers still got his budgets done, including the last one. So there's always tough talk, and Wisconsin politics is just rich with that, ripe with that. He was always able to work with those folks. And he told me this, I think he told us this at the state fair, even as sort of bitter it was, they actually figured things out in this budget and worked together, which is sort of surprising. Now, part of that might be the reality from Republicans on my side. Things aren't going to look good for us in the next few years ahead. Maybe they better start playing ball. That could be part of that. What I respect about Tony Evers, he stuck to his guns. And he was somebody that was committed to it. He came from education. He always highlighted education first because that was his background. And he said that from day one all the way through till next year when he serves his final day as governor. So I admire someone who says something and then does something. And he was true to his word. He is somebody who's hated by some Republicans in the state of Wisconsin. I never go there. I respect people that run for office, and I respect people who do the job of the constituents, all the constituents. And we can argue about the policies of Tony Evers, but at the end of the day, he was able to work with probably the most bitter partisan legislature on the other side and still get his stuff done. That I have respect for.
Mm-hmm. Kristen, do you have any thoughts on that, or if folks are going to be in opposition to Governor Evers?
I think one of the things is, and Steve, you can tell me if you think I'm wrong, but one of the things that I think worked for Evers, especially because he was never going to run for president, compared to some of the other, bigger name Democratic governors across the country. A lot of times I think he met Republican shenanigans kind of with a sigh and an eye roll. And I think that worked for him, right? Instead of there was his moments where, he'd drop a BS, like he swore on our show on air and we had to dump it. Every once in a while you could see him get a little fired up, but for the most part, it was kind of like, yeah, whatever. And I think there was maybe unintentional power to that because you couldn't really get under his skin. in the way of just being, I'm sure he was frustrated, but there just was something visibly kind of belittling of like shenanigans that I think he did.
Something about an educator, kids, you've try it,
because it's now been 10 years, almost 10 years of us hearing like the anti-Trump, some of the stuff that I think falls flat because it's just like, how do you continue to fight when it's like, well, this is just some of our reality. And you have to have the reality that half of our state, more than half of our state this last time, voted for Trump. And so having more nuance, having more understanding, and that, again, that's a hard line to walk in a primary. But I think that is one of the things, looking back on Tony Evers, why he was successful is because I don't think he let things get under his skin very easily.
I've called him the Mr. Rogers of politics, and
I love it.
That's the sort of the persona he had. But
I love Mr. Rogers.
Who doesn't like Mr. Rogers?
Yeah. One of the best parts of this conversation to me is clearly you guys, you have your political bona fides. You're bringing so much knowledge to our listeners, which, truly appreciate. And you're fun. You have moments of joy and humor, and we try to do that on CityCast Madison. So I'm going to give you a final question. Y'all, if you could choose any Wisconsin figure, dead, alive, human, or otherwise, to run for governor, who would you choose? It can be Bucky Badger. It could be a Brewer's sausage. I mean, it could be Fred Rogers, but we talk about neighborhoods a lot on the show. In fact, we are asking people to become neighbors if you're listening.
So anybody from any walk of life?
Any walk of life, yeah.
You know who I would pick? And this
I
is
hate these types of questions.
I'm sorry, Chris.
I've always put on the spot. I'm like, I don't know.
Former Packers coach Mike McCarthy. Why do I say that? He reached the echelon of his sport. He won a Super Bowl. He's like a tough as nails guy, and he tells it like it is. And that's, for a lot of people, that's what they want in a governor. That's my pick. I went to the sports world.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to.
How about Willem Dafoe? He's an actor.
No. He's a little scary, but maybe we'll get things done with it. The fear factor.
That's the thing. It's like actors and athletes. It's like, I want someone who knows how to govern. Right. And so I don't know.
Some highbrow answer from Kristen.
Let's bring Velar Phillips back from the dead.
That's a good choice.
That was mine too, Kristen. Yeah, that was one of the highlights of the recent years, is her getting a statue at the state capitol.
I mean, she's got a lot of press. She's got multiple schools named after her. She's got a statue. She's got streets. She's got a plaza.
She earned it all. So.
Yeah. I always like to say, listen to Black women. So
I said it from day one on my show, when I had a show with my news guy, Eric Bilstead, who now does the morning show. Women are smarter than men. All men should understand that and go forward with that idea. So that's my take.
Steve winning hearts. He's the next gov. Kristen, Steve, thank you so much for coming on CityCast Madison. It's really been a treat and educational. Thank you.
Well, yes, happy to come back anytime.
Thanks for having us on. It was a treat, and I love podcasts. And anytime you want us on, I'll be happy to come back.
That's Steve Scafidi and Kristen Bry, hosts of WTMJ's Point Taken. That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm your host, Bianca Martin. Don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. And I want to thank all of our current neighbors who help support this show. We cannot do it without you. And a big shout out to all of you new neighbors who have just joined us. Welcome. Thank you. I want to share a few messages we've received from neighbors on why they've joined the program. Libby B said, quote, local journalism deserves support in these trying times. So true, Libby. Deb V said, I want to support and be knowledgeable about what's going on in my city. And D&Z said, because you guys rock, seriously, for keeping me informed and up to date on all things going on in our great city and helping remind us why it's still great. If you want to join Dean, Deb, and Livy as neighbors, just go to membership.citycast.fm. We've still got a ways to go to meet our goals, so once again, please help make our show sustainable. Go to membership.citycast.fm. And while you're at it, if you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with a Politico in your life? Alrighty, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care.